Well, guys, I don't know how you're feeling right now, but I would be absolutely pumped if I were you. Can we get one more round of applause for Debbie? She is just the best. I feel like, if you don't have a note app going at, some convention like this, like you ought to. And even if it's just a couple words, like got to do this, got to do that, and then you get home, then of course it comes down to the implementation. So tons of gold nuggets here. And ultimately, I just challenge you to make the most of it, right? Like this stuff is absolute gold, but it's as if you weren't here if you don't execute on it. So let's get to it. My name is Brandon. That handsome guy over there is me, by the way. For 15 years, I had a gutter cleaning, window cleaning, and pressure wash business, okay? And I'm actually located on the west coast of Canada. So as you might know, it gets cold in Canada. And what that created was actually like a hyper seasonal business. Okay, so in the end, which I'll show you here shortly, we got up to 3 locations, and we would go from 2 technicians in February to 32 technicians in May, every single year. And we'd be lucky at that morning meeting if we had 6 returning repeat faces around the morning circle. So we had to create really great systems that allowed us to basically expand and contract with the seasonality. Because as you know, if you're not able to expand quick enough, you get booked up a week, you booked up 2 weeks, you booked up 3 weeks, and then by that point, if you're booking more than 3 weeks out, ultimately, what solution are we providing for all of our customers? Regardless of what you actually provide them, what solution are we providing them? Convenience, exactly. You're convenient. And if you're booking more than 3 weeks out, you're no longer a convenient, considerable solution to their problem, right? So we needed to build out the systems to allow us to hyper expand. And then on the flip side, when it got super cold, we had to be able to contract down to that skeleton crew of like 2 technicians. I'm also the founder of a performance pay bonus system called Bonus Up. And basically, through my 15 years of owning that business, I had 2 major breakthroughs. One of them was performance pay, and the second is what I'm here to talk about today, which is virtual assistants. So I'm also the founder of NinjaVA, and I'm a proud Conquer coach of 3 years now. So this is my story. This is my Josh Latimer humble beginnings, right? What's crazy is when I look at this image, I recall the emotions of when that image was taken.
That was a good work bench.
That was the Aerostar. It's like 91 vintage. What's crazy is I remember the emotions of when I took that image, that picture, and I was excited. I was proud. I felt accomplished, right? Like how cool is that? To look back on something now that was like almost laughable, right? And ultimately, those were borrowed ladders to start. This was actually second iteration of the van because the first one was a mom's minivan that had magnet decals on the side. And we basically photocopied our first 200 flyers at my friend's church, and we were in business. And what was cool is I was in my first year of college studying business, so I actually had something to apply what I was learning in the classroom to. So that was cool. But basically, through our 4-month summer holidays, if I got enough money made in the bank to pay for tuition for next fall, then I was golden, right? So what a beautiful place to be where you can almost do no harm, right? Like you don't have huge commitments and ultimately you can only fail forward is the worst case situation. Fortunately though, through 15 years of grit and tenacity and hunger and rethinking everything in my off season, we got up to 15 work vans. We did 2,500 jobs a year. And like I said, we would have at peak 32 technicians out in the field across our 3 locations. Okay? Now, as you can imagine, you can systematize a business, you can take away a lot of the pain points, and you can make things a little bit more efficient here and there, but ultimately, it's a rough go. It's a turbulent ride, especially if you're still the owner-operator, right? And as much as it was a stressful thing over COVID to try and get 32 butts in seats in those work vans when people were getting paid to stay at home, it was equally, if not more frustrating, to try and fill the seats in the office. right? I like to use the analogy that basically the office is the brains of the operation, right? So if things are clunky or not functioning proper or behind in the office, God help you. Like, it's going to be a real mess when it comes to the actual field, right? And basically, I had 4 full-time CSRs that were also trained on a very short runway, very truncated time horizon, and they were in charge of answering calls, sending, receiving client emails, helping us to fill the positions in the field, and then working our company's CRM. We needed 4 of those people. And I remember it clearly, the 4 individuals that I had. I had one lady, she had some serious baby daddy drama, coming in from home. And I swear I'm a nice guy, but like no less than 3 or 4 times a day, she would just leave in tears. And it's like, we're busy here. It's May. You know, the phone's ringing. We would get over 90 calls a day. And she's just leaving. And then, you know, not sure where she's at. And then sure enough, she would reappear. I had another guy on staff. He was basically a manager of a plumbing supply location in town. And he moved at a snail's pace. And it was so painful, seriously, because this is like a hustle and bustle gig, right? Like, we got over 90 calls coming in, we got emails, it's hyper seasonal here, and this guy, I swear he had an assistant of his own. Unfortunately, in this capacity, he was serving as the assistant. So it was not well designed from the get-go. I had another lady, she was delightful, very pleasant, very warm, just a very warm persona about her, but she could not get the attention to detail thing down. And it was so frustrating, because ultimately, the office is all about little details. That's what it comes down to, right? I reflect back on the one day where this office that we're talking about, it's open concept. As the owner, you know how it is. You're kind of always like, you know the saying, sleeping with one ear open? You're kind of doing that in the office, like working with one ear open, right? And I recall overhearing the conversation on the phone that was coming in through someone else's line, and you could tell it was like a confused tone. Like, the person on the other end of the line didn't know really what was happening, right? Turns out our crew was up on a roof cleaning this person's home, and they were not our customer, right? So what happened? I get it, right? Quote comes in, you get the address wrong. Guess what shows on the work order? The wrong address, right? So there we are. This person's not a client of ours. They're frustrated. I'm frustrated. The crew's frustrated. What was even worse? This was the second time that week that we were cleaning the wrong home. So that's a good depiction of the way I was feeling about now. It was so frustrating. And you know what was even more frustrating? I blame myself first. I interviewed and hired every one of those CSRs to come in and do that work. And at best, we were inefficient, we were clunky, and I was left feeling like we were overpaying and getting vast under delivery. Each one of those seats were costing me between $22 and $27 an hour, plus your government burdens of, you know, by the time you get the parking spot, the workstation, the workers' comp, the FICA, you're another 20, 30%. And I felt like what I was paying was here, and the value I was getting was not even sustainable. Right? So I knew something had to change. And it did. At that point, I made the really tough decision to basically go through and clean house. And again, that was really tough for me, because if you've ever had to terminate the position of a technician, it's one thing. And a lot of the people that we hired were 19 to 23-year-old guys. So I felt like I could kind of like put them in a headlock and like send them back out to society, maybe a bit better of an individual. I didn't feel the same way with office people, right? And that day absolutely sucked. And I blame myself first. So ultimately, when that happened, I knew there needs to be a better way to do this. There needs to be a better way. And we can't keep building on sand, because this is just not sustainable. So ultimately, this lady here is Jan, and she was our first virtual assistant. What was cool about this, I would soon learn, is virtual assistants are predominantly in this industry located in the Philippines. And the Philippines is very westernized. Chances are, if you've ever called a 1-800 number, it gets routed to the Philippines. They celebrate Christianity, so they celebrate the same holidays as us. And ultimately, they probably even worked in a position that is very similar to what you're looking for as well. So that was really, really cool. What I soon found out is Jan was more detail-oriented, more engaged, and at the end of it all, thankful for the opportunity to work. If you're paying someone in the Philippines $9 to $11 per hour, you're paying them the equivalent of what a dentist makes there. And I know because I've actually backpacked through the Philippines. So this assignment that I'm on, which is my ultimate mission here, is to help 1,000 entrepreneurs each save 1,000 hours of time, really hits home because I've literally backpacked through the Philippines. And I've been there, but I also know a lot of you all who need help in the office. So it's really cool in both directions. And ultimately, what it came down to is not only was she more competent, more capable, thankful at the end of it, at the end, she was actually the manager of our 3 new CSR VAs. So we were able to prove that we could actually scale this model in this dimension. So what we found is the work quality went up, and at the end of the year, we saved $70,000 in admin overhead by making this transition. That's a lot of windows. It's a lot of trips to Mexico too. So that was really cool. So that's kind of my backstory. What I want to do for y'all today is I want to show you the hiring process of virtual assistants and what I've learned. Because not only have I made extensive use of virtual assistants in my own businesses, but I've helped a lot of other clients now to basically get them going with a VA of their own, right? So this is kind of the rough layout of what I want to show you. And I'm just going to kind of sprinkle in my experience, my tips, my tricks. And ultimately, if you think this is something that's valid for you to go try on your own, more power to you. That's awesome. If you already got a VA, that's even more cool. Show of hands, who here has a VA already? Wicked. Awesome. Like I said, in 15 years, 2 big breakthroughs were performance pay and virtual assistants. So I don't take this stuff lightly, and I think it's an absolute game changer if you can adapt to it. So we're going to go through job description, reviewing applicants, interview, onboarding, and training. Sound cool? Yeah. Awesome. So the first step is trying to define what do you actually want your virtual assistant to lend assistance with. It's probably the question I get the most. I just don't know what I should get them to do, right? So what I've actually done is I put together this guide. It's a 20-page ebook, and it answers the question, what can a VA do in a home service business? So free giveaway if you want it. No obligation, don't give me your email or anything, just I want to share what I know. If you're also in this headspace, I'd highly recommend doing a basic time journaling exercise. Okay, so that might be a fairly manualized process. That might mean literally setting your timer on your phone for like 30-minute intervals, and then you just have a piece of paper and you're just scribbling down what it is that is ultimately filling your day. Because show of hands here, who feels like they could use some extra time or their days are always full? Okay, these guys are lying. And these guys, I appreciate your honesty. No, absolutely, right? And that's what it all comes down to. Ultimately, we're trying to, as business owners, preserve our time to do the things that are highest value, but also the things that bring you more energy, okay? I feel like the former we always know. Yeah, do more important stuff, right? Which, yes, that is important. But also, I can reflect back and tell you firsthand that after a day of fielding angry customer callbacks, I was not in a headspace to be the CEO of my company, right? Like I was leached. I was so burnt out because I was doing stuff that was taking my energy versus fulfilling me and bringing me energy, right? So things that are low value, repetitive, ongoing, great VA potential task, as well as the things that are taking your energy instead of bringing you more energy, okay? So definitely take a look at that guide. There's a lot of stuff that they can do remotely, okay? And ultimately, it can come down to phones, to email, to CRM, and ultimately think about the things too that you feel like would be valuable and beneficial for you, your customers, or your employees, but maybe are just not getting done when things get really busy. Right? If you're booked out 3 weeks and you got 15 voicemails, are you doing happy calls? to make sure Mrs. Smith from yesterday was totally satisfied with the crew? And by the way, if she was, do you have time to refer a friend or family member who could use a quote on our services? You're probably not doing that, right? Posting regularly on social media is another great example of things we know we should be doing. But ultimately, if you have someone like this who can just be plugged in and that's the first thing they do each and every day, then that's way more powerful, right? Next step is the recruitment, okay? I am pretty confident that the ratio is about 200 initial applicants to one final candidate, both for an admin position as well as a technician position for that elusive rock star that we're always on the hunt for. This is 200 people, and that's one, right? So you have to have a way to filter down the hiring funnel. You have to filter down the initial applicants down to that one. And if you're only doing this as a one-off mission or situation, it might be hard to create that, and it's a lot of legwork to put them all through it. But what that should look like ultimately is the qualities that you feel are very important inside of this role, you want to try and test at various points inside of that hiring funnel, right? One great one that I love is have your write-up of your job ad, and one of the bullet points put, if you're still reading this, congratulations, please tell us your favorite fruit in the subject line, right? Obviously that challenges their attention to detail, which is immensely important in a position like this, right? And you're going to continue to kind of filter them down, is the concept, to the point of having maybe an initial interview and then a final interview with potentially some aptitude and assessments in between. But ultimately, I feel like there's just something to be said for that 200 to 1. And I think that also holds true in the field as for technicians as well. Inside of NinjaVA, this is kind of how we created the software. So ultimately, we have some autonomous software that basically brings through hundreds of candidates per day from local job boards in the Philippines. And ultimately, this is what it spits out. So from a glance and spending seconds or minutes of your day, you can see, what do they cost? What is their average score on the assessment? And if you want to learn more about them, you basically have a visual resume where you can learn everything about that candidate. So hobbies, personal level, age, skills, abilities, personality type, work experience, availability for work, how much they want to work, right? So it's all here. And this is taken us a grand total of a minute so far. At the bottom of that, basically we have a pre-recorded interview. So Z and Katrina are actually my hiring managers at NinjaVA. So here, through a 10-minute interview, initial interview, you can hear them speak. And obviously, ability to speak and write in very good English is one of the most important things that we factor when we're filtering people down. We've also built out this custom assessment here. And this is specific to the home services and to the trades industry. A case in point, one of the questions on there is a job or calendar that's all but full, and there's a job. And it says, where would you place this job if you were in charge of scheduling it, right? So things that are very applied and very in line with the industries that we're all in. And ultimately, it breaks it down in terms of their customer service ability, their logic and intelligence, their written English, their spoken English, and their attention to detail. And then basically, if you just hit that request an interview, that sends us a notification. We arrange for a 3-person group interview. So you'd be on the line, the candidate would be on the line, and then we'd also be on the line too. Again, this is the way we do it. If you could do something like this for yourself, imagine how much more effective that hire would be and what a greater chance of success that would entail. So the next step then is we want to shortlist, ideally I would say 3 to 5 candidates for an interview type situation, right? And that would be conducted over something like Zoom. We want it to be a video call so that we can interact with them the best way possible, right? That's very important. What I've found is if you can have open-ended questions, those are usually the best ones. Something like opening up with, hey, Jan, it's so nice to have you here. Just tell us about yourself. What are you up to these days? Right? Like, I love that question because it's so open-ended. And for me on the other end, I'm listening to what they say as the actual answer that will be written down. But more importantly, I'm actually listening to the in-between, right? Are they energetic about their response? Do they feel like they just rolled out of bed, or do they feel like they're motivated and inspired, right? Open-ended questions are definitely the way to go, but there's also such thing as what we call deal breakers, right? So one of the things with virtual assistants, obviously they're halfway around the world, and off of East Coast time zone, they're 12 hours removed. So if it's 1 p.m. here, it's 1 a.m. over there, right? So the expectation inside of NinjaVA is you will be working on local time zones, essentially the graveyard shift by local standards. Now, good news is BPO, business process outsourcing, is a big deal in the Philippines, and that's actually not that daunting for the average person. They've done it before. However, it is a knockout question, right? Because if they're like, whoa, nope, I want to work on local time zones. I don't know about you guys, but I don't get a lot of calls from, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., right? So that's one of the things that would be considered a knockout question, right? So ultimately, done is better than perfect, like any system you build it for your service business. And you want to create a list of questions that we're going to go through. One other cool little hack too is I recommend on Zoom, people can't hear if you do a screen grab. I always recommend do a screen grab of that person and their face, because that'll give you the ability to really recall when it comes time to evaluating all the applicants one after another. And it'll be as powerful as the notes that you took. Inside of NinjaVA, this is something that we provide as an offer that's kind of just baked into the process. So we always offer to officiate the interview call, because chances are high, if you're in this room, you're probably really good at hiring and interviewing technicians, maybe a little shakier when it comes to admin, and then virtual admin might be something you've never had experience with, right? So if that's the case, this is all that we do. As far as onboarding goes, my best tip for you is get them on a group messaging app, and actually take this as an opportunity, if you haven't already, to roll out a group messaging app for your entire team. There's a lot of people that are still running just with SMS, and honestly, reflecting back on it, you're leaving a lot of potential for really concise communication on the table if you're not using something like WhatsApp or Voxer or Slack. Definitely do that. And what this will do is it'll bring you together with somebody who's halfway around the world, because you're not texting them, and they sync up nicely with your laptop. And it doesn't matter if you're Android or iOS or something else, it kind of brings everyone together. So highly recommend starting with that. I also recommend what's called a soft start. So although maybe next Wednesday is the official start, I would say let's plan on a soft start, which might be just like a 1-hour quick call to go over our company CRM and our core values. And that's all we're going to do, just for 1 hour, right? What this does is it just makes it a little bit less daunting when the inevitable actual start date comes, because you're not feeling like, oh wow, we are starting with our heels on the ground from scratch, right? This will also give you a bit of a dry run at it to know kind of where do I got to go to stay ahead of getting my virtual assistant what they need in order to onboard them as efficiently as possible. Things like permissions, new user accounts, stuff like that, right? As far as check-in frequency goes, I'd recommend if you're onboarding a new virtual assistant, it would be a morning video call and an evening or afternoon video call for the first week, okay? It might be a shorter call, 5 or 10 minutes, but at least do morning and afternoon video call check-in for the first week. For the second week, I'd say you could probably reduce that maybe to like 1 morning video call check-in. And then after that, I'd say it could be just more on an as-needed basis would be sufficient. This is a really important step, and sometimes it gets forgotten, or it's not really something that people can execute on because they already got a full calendar, right? So if you know a VA onboarding is happening, you or somebody who's crucial on your team should have this time slated in your calendar so that it happens. And this is going to make them feel welcome. It's going to ensure that they're not going home with any questions or uneasiness. Maybe they don't have great feedback. They don't know how well they're doing. So having this is really, really important. Setting expectations from the get-go, I think, is also a very important thing. And ultimately, that could look like, hey, anytime we're having a call, we want the cameras on. That's just how we do calls here. We don't do camera off calls, right? Could be, hey, when we're working, whether it be remote or in person, we have a dress code. It's not like tuxedo requiring, but we do have a dress code, right? Stuff like this, let's get that communicated on the onset. The whole point here is we want to state what our expectations are in a very clear manner so that they can rise up and meet those expectations, right? If you have those expectations but they don't get communicated, it's really tough for them to know that, obviously. And then let's start with the end in mind. Ultimately, with this hire, this position, what do we want them to be proficient in, and how effective do we want them to be in the end, say zoomed out 3 months from now? What all do we want to put on their plate in the end? Let's talk about that early on so that we both know where we're going and we can work up to it. As far as training goes, this is the academy inside of NinjaVA. So basically, it's going to get you and your business ready for a virtual assistant to sign on board. And things like that job description guide that you just downloaded are one of the documents. We also have like onboarding guides, phone system guides, stuff like that, just best practices. Another tip that I would have for you is start with the expectation that your VA is going to create the SOPs for everything they learn. Who here likes creating documentation for their company? I got one. Yeah, it's a dry subject, and also you're probably not great at doing it because you know everything. You're not approaching it from a position of somebody who's just learning it for the first time. So if you preface the conversation saying, hey, Miss VA, it's great to have you on board. What I want you to do is document your learning experience and everything you learn here, because that is not only going to serve as quick reference material for you that you can refer back to, it's going to show me that you understood the assignment and what I showed you, right? And speaking from the position of just having sold my business, it's going to make your business a lot more valuable. Because in the eyes of a sophisticated investor or buyer, they want to see that this stuff is documented and it's not living, in Jake's mind, right? Yeah. So things like Loom, or if y'all haven't seen ScribeHow, it is super cool. Basically, you hit record, you go do a thing, and it'll spit out the PDF documentation, complete with like screen grabs, and it'll highlight where you clicked, and it'll put in like a step of something to be aware of at that point. For certain processes, it's good to use Loom. For other ones, I'd recommend ScribeHow, and it's free. The other thing I would start with is what's called activity log. Okay, and this is basically just an expectation that you communicate. And it's for you to define what would go in that activity log, right? So it might be, hey, I'd like you to just check in on this Slack channel when you start in the morning. I'd like you to let me know when you go on breaks, and any sort of calls, emails, quotes, whatever you're doing, I'd like to know about, so that there's a little bit of a breadcrumb history that I can make sure that I follow up and make sure stuff was done correctly. And ultimately, if this person's remote, I just want to know that I'm getting good value for my hard-earned dollars, right? Something like this might feel tedious to the people in this room. By a virtual assistant standards, likely they've already done this, right? There's also iterations or renditions of this. Maybe it's an hourly summary. Maybe it's a half-day summary. Maybe it's a daily summary. Whatever you feel is necessary is definitely something you might want to give some thought to and express as an expectation going into the relationship. Another question I get is, but they're not here. They're not part of my local area. So how are they going to know the different neighborhoods and stuff, right? Well, Google My Maps. And you literally got to search Google My Maps. And if you do that, basically it's My Maps, but you are basically able to draw on the maps different regions and areas. You're also able to put the different waypoints. So you might be like, my shop is here, my main vendor is here. And what we basically did is we superimposed 8-foot by 8-foot decal in our office when we had office workers, and then we made that same version available in a digital format. And what was really cool is if you search inside of your map, it will put the waypoint, and then you could zoom back out and see what neighborhood you're in. So if there's anyone that's not familiar with your local area, this is a super quick and easy way to get very familiar. And ultimately, we know as a mobile service provider, being very efficient with your routing is super crucial, right? So this gives them the tool that they need in order to fulfill that. One kind of further point that you can add onto this is, neighborhood codes like BNA. Well, we actually had that for each one of the local neighborhoods in our city. So at a glance, if I looked at my job or calendar, I could see BNA or UPSA was Upper Sahalee, for instance, right? So at a glance, I know exactly where that's routed. I don't have to click into each job because across 15 crews, that's a super tedious exercise while the customer's still on the line. You're trying to just book the job, right? So that was another really cool, helpful trick. This is the NinjaVA dashboard that we've created. And we actually integrate with Jobber and with House Call Pro now, which is super cool. So we're in the App Store. And ultimately, you can see how many quotes, how many invoices, how many jobs your VA has created on your behalf. And you can also see down on the bottom right-hand corner the activity log of all the things that they've completed inside of your CRM. Basically, this is reporting on what gets done in your House Call Pro. You can also give them a bonus if they're doing a great job. You can look at their timesheets, or you could give them feedback, and ultimately that feedback comes back to us. And the whole concept here is we want to keep you on offense so that you can go drive top-line revenue or train your people how to upsell on the ground better, whatever it is, but do offense. And if you submit feedback that's like, hey, Susie, my VA was doing great, but now she's starting to come in a little late, great, that's defense, hand it over to us, and we'll approach it in a non-confrontational manner, saying that it's just a regular quality audit, and we'll try and restate what expectations are and get them up to par. What's also cool is it takes live screen grabs of your VA while they're working. So you can see mouse activity as well as keyboard activity, and then every 3 minutes while they're logged in. Obviously, if they're on break or logged out, this doesn't function. But this, again, just gives you peace of mind knowing that, again, your hard-earned dollars are going to a good place. This is Al's computer. He's one of our Filipino developers. So I can't tell you if that's right or not, but what I do know is he's not working for someone else, he's not sleeping, and he's not wasting time on YouTube. So that makes me feel good. And this is like a trust but verify thing. This is not to be like hitting F5 refresh each and every hour, right? It's just if you're wondering, you have it available to you. This has been my VA experience. So not only did I heavily employ the use of virtual assistants in my own home service business, I also use them now to conduct what we do inside of NinjaVA. So like I said, that's Katrina and that's Z, and they run the hiring funnel, getting us from that 200 initial applicants to that one final candidate for your review. And then when you sign up, you would have 3 or 4 to review. And again, the whole concept here is we don't want you to waste time sifting through that if that's not, your passion project in life. We can do that for you, right? And the whole offer here is, again, we can officiate that call and ultimately get you to the place where you're excited to get this individual onboarded. We do have a show special going right now. So the way it works is our regular placement fee is $9.95. And then after that, you just pay the hourly cost for your VA. And the VAs actually state what their hourly requirement is. It ranges between $9 and $11 per hour, okay? Now what's cool about that is for that $9 to $11, the vast majority goes directly to the VA. It also covers credit card transaction fees because you actually pay for this service using your credit card, which is great to expense an entire person's labor to a credit card for points or cash back. We also get them paid through international money transfer every single week, and it just happens auto-magically. And it's ongoing support. It also comes with a 12-month replacement guarantee. At the end of the day, VAs are great, but things change and people change sometimes. So if, unfortunately, you made the wrong decision and you picked the wrong one, then for 12 months, we'll replace them with no questions asked. Awesome. I'm gonna stay around and hang out. I love to talk shop. I'm on a mission here to help 1,000 entrepreneurs each save 1,000 hours of time. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach me at the end. Thank you so much.